Admiral Crixtal stood on the bridge of his massive command ship, watching the final battle unfold before him. The alien commander had been fighting humans for 3 long years, and today would mark the end of their resistance. Terra Station, humanity's last major stronghold, hung in space like a wounded animal. Its once bright lights flickered weakly as hegemony plasma cannons tore through its defenses. Inside the station, Captain Hansol Kim gripped the metal railing of the command center. Sweat dripped down his face as he watched the tactical display. Red warning lights flashed everywhere. The situation looked hopeless. His crew worked frantically at their stations, trying to keep the shields up just a little longer. "Sir, Sectors 7 through 12 have lost all power," reported Lieutenant Nari Park, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. She was young, barely 25, but had proven herself reliable during the worst moments of the war. "Shield. Generators are failing faster than we can repair them." Hansol nodded grimly. He had expected this day would come. The humans had been outmatched from the beginning. Their ships were good, but the hegemony had technology that seemed almost magical. Energy weapons that could slice through the strongest. Armor. Shields that could absorb incredible amounts of damage. Faster ships with better sensors. Outside, another human destroyer exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The crew of Terra Station watched helplessly as their friends and comrades died. They had been fighting this war for so long that many had forgotten what peace felt like. The hegemony had been systematic in their conquest. They didn't just want to defeat humanity, they wanted to completely destroy their ability to fight back. Every major shipyard had been bombed. Every military academy had been reduced to rubble. The great fleets that once protected Earth's colonies were now nothing but scrap metal floating in space. Admiral Crixtal had led this campaign personally. He was proud of his efficiency. Other species had taken decades to conquer. But the humans would be finished in just 3 years. They fought with impressive determination, he had to admit that. Even when facing impossible odds, they never seemed to give up completely. But determination alone couldn't win wars against superior technology. "Prepare the surrender demand," Crixtal ordered his communications officer. The battle was essentially over. Terra Station's weapons had stopped firing. Their shields were down to less than 10% power. It was time to end this charade and formally accept humanity's defeat. But something nagged at the Admiral's mind. His intelligence officers had been reporting strange activities in the outer regions of human space. Massive construction projects in the asteroid belts. Huge amounts of raw materials being moved around. Industrial facilities that seemed to be working around the clock on some kind of secret project. Then, 3 weeks ago, all communication from these facilities had suddenly stopped. Not destroyed, just silent. His scouts had tried to investigate, but the areas were too heavily defended by automated systems. Whatever the humans were building out there, they desperately wanted to keep it secret. Crixtal had assumed it was just another desperate attempt to build more conventional warships. Humans were stubborn that way, even when they were clearly beaten. They kept trying to find some way to fight back. But conventional ships wouldn't change anything. The hegemony had already proven their technological superiority countless times. Still, the silence bothered him. In his experience, defeated enemies usually became more desperate and noisy as the end approached. They sent more radio transmissions, not fewer. They begged for help from anyone who would listen. They didn't just go quiet. "Sir," his tactical officer interrupted his thoughts. "Terra Station is requesting permission to communicate." "Put them through," Crixtal replied. This would be their surrender. Finally, this tedious war would be over. Captain Hansol's face appeared on the main screen. The human looked tired and defeated, exactly as Crixtal had expected. His uniform was torn and dirty. There were dark circles under his eyes. "Admiral Crixtal," Hansol began, his voice hoarse. "I am prepared to discuss terms." "There are no terms to discuss," Crixtal replied coldly. "Surrender unconditionally and your people will be treated fairly under hegemony law." Hansol was quiet for a long moment. Then, strangely, he smiled. It wasn't the smile of a defeated man. It was something else entirely. I'm afraid that won't be possible, Admiral, Han Sol said quietly. You see, the war isn't quite over yet. Before Krixtal could respond, the communication cut out. The Admiral stared at the blank screen, feeling an uncomfortable chill run down his spine. Something was very wrong here. Commander Jaewon Lee carefully steered his small reconnaissance ship through the twisted metal graveyard that had once been Mars's mighty defense network. The silence in space felt heavy and oppressive. Just 6 months ago, this area had been alive with activity. Thousands of ships, orbital stations, and defensive platforms protecting one of humanity's most important colonies. Now there was nothing but wreckage drifting slowly through the void. His navigator, Ensign Mi-young Choi, sat hunched over her instruments in the cramped cockpit. She was barely 22 years old, fresh out of the academy when the war started. The conflict had aged her quickly. Her once bright eyes now carried the weight of too many battles and too many friends lost. Commander, I'm picking up some strange readings about 50 kilometers ahead, she reported, her voice barely above a whisper. In enemy territory, even the smallest sound felt too loud. The debris pattern doesn't match anything in our database. Jaewon nodded and adjusted their course slightly. Their ship was designed for stealth missions like this one. It was small, fast, and nearly invisible to most sensors. The hull was coated with special materials that absorbed radar waves instead of reflecting them. The engines ran almost silently, perfect for sneaking around behind enemy lines. They had been searching for 3 days now, following rumors and scattered intelligence reports about something big happening in the outer regions of the solar system. Command had received fragmentary messages about massive construction projects, secret facilities, and resources being moved on an unprecedented scale. Then, suddenly, all communication from these projects had stopped. There, Mi-young pointed, at her screen. Those coordinates shouldn't exist according to our navigation charts, but I'm definitely detecting artificial structures. As they moved deeper into unexplored space, the wreckage around them began to change. Instead of destroyed military equipment, they started seeing pieces of industrial machinery. Massive metal beams that looked like they came from construction sites. Pieces of equipment designed for building things, not destroying them. This is weird, Jaewon muttered, studying the debris patterns. Look at how this stuff is arranged. It's not random like battle damage. Someone deliberately cleared this area out. Mi-young's instruments began beeping more rapidly. Sir, I'm reading massive gravitational anomalies ahead. Whatever's out there, it's huge. They crept forward cautiously, their ship's passive sensors, straining to gather information without giving away their position. What they found waiting for them in the darkness made both of them gasp in amazement. Floating in perfect formation were the largest artificial structures either of them had ever seen, shipyards that stretched for kilometers in every direction. Each one was big enough to build vessels the size of small cities. The construction facilities were clearly human-made, but they were unlike anything in the official military records. My God, Mi-young whispered. How long would it take to build something like this? Jaewon was already running calculations in his head. Years, maybe decades. And look at the power requirements. They would need the output of several fusion reactors just to keep the lights on. But as they moved closer, something even more disturbing became apparent. The shipyards were completely empty, not abandoned or destroyed, evacuated. The construction bays that should have contained half-finished ships were vacant. Tool arrays were neatly stored away. Equipment was secured and powered down. Everything suggested that work had been completed recently, and the facilities had been carefully shut down. Commander, look at the size of those construction bays, Mi-young said, her voice filled with awe and fear. What kind of ships would need that much space? Jaewon studied the massive empty chambers. Each one could have held a dozen of the largest ships in the human fleet. The implications were staggering. If these facilities had been working at full capacity, they could have built vessels of unimaginable size and power. Pull up the resource allocation reports from the past 2 years, he ordered. I want to know where all our raw materials have been going. Mi-young's fingers flew over her keyboard. What she found made them both realize the true scope of what they were seeing. Sir, according to these records, humanity has been mining Asteroids at 10 times the normal rate. Steel production is up by 500%. Rare metals, computer components, weapons-grade materials, everything has been redirected to classified projects. And now it's all gone? Jaewon said quietly. Whatever. They built here, it's already deployed. They spent another hour documenting everything they could see. The evidence was overwhelming but terrifying. Humanity had been secretly building something massive while fighting a losing war against the hegemony. Resources that could have been used to strengthen their conventional fleets had instead been poured into this mysterious project. As they prepared to leave, Mi-young noticed something that made her blood run cold. Commander, look at the construction schedules still displayed on those control towers. The last ships left these facilities exactly 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago was when all communication from the outer system had stopped. 3 weeks ago was when the hegemony had begun their final assault on Terra Station, confident that human resistance was finally broken. We need to get this information back to command immediately, Jaewon said, firing up their engines. Whatever's coming, it's already out there in the dark waiting, in the freezing darkness far beyond Pluto, where sunlight was nothing more than a distant star. Something massive began to wake up. The Dreadnought. Vengeance had been drifting silently in the void for months, waiting for this moment. Its hull, darker than the space around it, suddenly came alive with thousands of tiny lights as systems that had been sleeping finally powered up. Captain Do-hyun Kang felt the ship awakening around him, and the sensation was unlike anything any human had ever experienced before. Thin cables connected to ports behind his ears carried electrical signals directly into his brain. The experimental neural interface technology was so new and dangerous that most scientists had refused to work on it. But desperate times had called for desperate measures. As the connection established itself, Kang could suddenly feel every part of his massive ship. The fusion reactors humming deep in the engine room felt like his own heartbeat. The weapon systems charging up felt like flexing his muscles. The sensor arrays scanning space felt like opening his eyes after a long sleep. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Neural link is stable, reported his chief engineer, Lieutenant Taemin Park, monitoring the connection from a safe distance. All systems are responding to mental commands. Kang nodded slowly, still getting used to the strange sensation. When he moved his head, he could feel the ship's massive sensor dish turning to follow his gaze. When he clenched his fist, the weapon systems powered up automatically. The ship had become an extension of his own body. Around the Vengeance, space itself seemed to shimmer and bend as 49 other identical vessels began emerging from their hiding places. Each dreadnought was over 1 kilometer long and built like a floating fortress. Their hulls were made from materials that hadn't existed before the war, quantum-bonded metals that were harder than diamond but somehow still flexible enough to bend without breaking. These ships looked nothing like the sleek, elegant vessels that humanity had built before the war. There was no beauty in their design, no consideration for comfort or appearance. Every line, every surface, every component had been designed with one purpose in mind: to destroy enemies as efficiently as possible. Captain So-Jin Lee commanding. The Dreadnought Retribution was the first to establish communication. Her voice came through the quantum communication system with perfect clarity, despite the vast distances involved. All ships report ready status, she announced. Neural interfaces are stable, weapon systems are fully charged. We are go for final approach. One by one, the other captains checked in. Captain Min-ho Kim on the Devastation, Captain Ye-jin Choi on the Annihilation, Captain Sung-woo Park on the Obliteration. 50 ships total, each one commanded by a volunteer who knew they would probably never see home again. These weren't military officers following orders from distant commanders. Every single person on these ships had volunteered for what everyone called the final mission. They had all lost family members to the hegemony. They had all watched their worlds burn. They had all decided that if humanity was going to die, they would take their enemies with them. Remember your training, Kang broadcast to all ships. The IR, neural interface, will try to overwhelm you with information. Don't fight it. Let the ship become part of you. Trust the technology. The technology was indeed overwhelming. Through his connection, Kang could sense not just his own ship, but faint impressions from all the others as well. 50 massive war machines, each one carrying enough firepower to level entire cities, all connected through quantum entanglement in ways that scientists were still trying to understand. The weapons these ships carried had never been tested in actual combat. They couldn't be tested safely. The prototype experiments had accidentally vaporized several asteroids and created gravitational distortions that were still detectable months later. The full-scale versions were theoretical weapons that existed at the very edge of human understanding of physics. Fusion cores are at maximum output, reported Chief Engineer Park. All weapon systems show green across the board. We are ready to engage. Kang felt a strange calm settle over him. For 3 years, he had watched the hegemony systematically destroy everything he cared about. His hometown on Mars had been bombed into glass. His brother had died defending the Jupiter colonies. His wife had been evacuated to Earth, and he hadn't heard from her in 8 months. But today, all of that would be answered. All ships begin final approach to Terra Station, he ordered. The hegemony wanted to show us what war looks like. Today, we show them how it ends. The 50 dreadnoughts began moving as one, their massive hulls cutting through space like knives. Behind them, they left no exhaust trails, no heat signatures, no trace that they had ever been there. The stealth technology that hid them was as advanced as their weapons, another desperate innovation born from humanity's darkest hour. As they accelerated toward their target, each captain felt the same grim satisfaction. The enemy had won every battle, conquered every world, destroyed every fleet. But they had made one critical mistake. They had given humanity time to get angry. Admiral Krixtal was reviewing the final surrender terms when every alarm on his command ship began screaming at once. The bridge, which had been calm and orderly just moments before, suddenly erupted into chaos as officers shouted warnings and ran to their stations. "What's happening?" Krixtal demanded, spinning around to face his tactical officer. "Sir, we're detecting massive spatial distortions all around Terra Station," the officer reported, his voice shaking with confusion. "Something is tearing holes in space itself." On the main display screen, reality appeared to be breaking apart. Bright cracks of energy spread across the darkness like lightning, and through these rifts, something enormous was emerging. The distortions were so powerful that they were interfering with every sensor system the hegemony had. Captain Han Sol Kim, still on Terra Station, watched through the observation windows as the impossible became real. 50 massive shapes materialized from the energy rifts, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built before. These weren't the sleek, elegant ships from Earth's past. These were monsters made of metal and fury. The lead vessel, the Retribution, commanded by Captain Su Jin Yoon, completed its emergence first. Its hull was over a kilometer long and covered in weapon ports that glowed with an ominous blue light. Strange energy patterns ran along its surface like veins carrying liquid fire. All hegemony vessels. "This is Captain Su Jin Yoon of the Human Defense Force," came a transmission that reached every ship in the area. Her voice was calm, almost conversational. "You have 30 seconds to surrender unconditionally." Admiral Krixtal stared at the display in disbelief. These ships were impossible. His intelligence reports had never mentioned anything like this. Humanity was supposed to be defeated, broken, finished. Where had these monsters come from? "Impossible," he muttered. "Scan those vessels. I want to know everything about them." His science officer worked frantically at his console, but the readings made no sense. "Sir, the energy signatures are off the charts. Each of those ships is generating more power than our entire fleet combined. And the weapons, I've never seen anything like them." Captain Su Jin Yoon's voice came through the communication system again. 20 seconds, Admiral. I suggest you make your decision quickly." Krixtal's military training kicked in. Even faced with the impossible, he was still a combat commander. "All ships attack Formation Delta. Focus fire on the lead vessel. These are still just human ships no matter how big they are." The hegemony fleet, which had been confidently surrounding Terra Station just minutes before, now found itself facing an enemy they didn't understand. Plasma cannons that had easily destroyed human ships for 3 years opened fire on the Dreadnoughts. The energy beams struck the Retribution's hull and simply disappeared. Not reflected, not absorbed, they vanished as if they had never existed at all. Direct hit on the lead vessel, reported Krixtal's weapons officer. No damage detected. Sir, our weapons aren't even scratching them. Captain Sujin Yoon's response was swift and terrible. You had your chance, she said simply. The Retribution's main weapon fired once. The beam that emerged from its forward section was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. It didn't look like energy or matter. It looked like reality itself was being twisted into a weapon. The beam struck the hegemony cruiser Dominant, and the entire ship simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized. It was as if it had never been there at all. What was that? Krixtal screamed. What kind of weapon can do that? Before anyone could answer, all 50 dreadnoughts fired simultaneously. The coordinated salvo was a sight that would haunt the nightmares of every survivor. Beams of twisted space-time reached out like the fingers of an angry god and touched 12 hegemony vessels. All 12 ships vanished instantly. Sir, we've lost an entire battle squadron, his tactical officer reported, his voice barely controlled panic. Complete. Destruction in 0.3 seconds, no wreckage, no survivors, nothing. The remaining hegemony ships began to break formation, their commanders overcome with fear. These weren't the humans they had been fighting. These were something else entirely, something that had taken humanity's desperation and forged it into weapons that could unmake reality itself. Captain Do-hyun Kang, commanding the Vengeance, felt the neural interface feeding him targeting information faster than any human mind should have been able to process. Through his connection to the ship, he could sense the terror of the enemy crews. He could feel their confusion and fear. Second wave, all ships, came Sujin's order. Leave no survivors. The dreadnoughts moved through the hegemony fleet like sharks through a school of fish. Their weapons reached out again and again, each shot erasing another enemy vessel from existence. The aliens' plasma cannons and energy shields, which had dominated human forces for 3 years, were completely useless against technology that operated outside the normal laws of physics. Admiral Krixtal watched his fleet disappear around him. Ships that had conquered dozens of worlds were being deleted from reality by weapons that shouldn't exist. In less than 10 minutes, his force of over 200 vessels had been reduced to fewer than 50. Sir, we have to retreat, his second-in-command urged. Whatever these things are, we can't fight them. But Krixtal was beginning to understand the horrible truth. Humanity hadn't been losing the war for 3 years. They had been buying time. Every battle, every defeat, every destroyed colony had been part of a larger plan. While the hegemony had been celebrating their victories, the humans had been building weapons that could end the war in a single engagement. Send a message to the Hegemony Council, he ordered quietly. Tell them we were wrong about the humans. We were very, very wrong. The silence that followed the battle was almost as shocking as the violence that had preceded it. Captain Do-hyun Kang stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, looking out at what remained of the hegemony fleet. Scattered pieces of twisted metal drifted through space, the only evidence that hundreds of alien warships had ever existed. Admiral Krixtal's command vessel hung motionless in the void, its weapons powered down, and its shields collapsed. The alien commander's voice crackled through the communication system, broken and defeated. This is Admiral Krixtal of the Hegemony Third Fleet, came the transmission. I formally surrender all forces under my command. The war is over. Please show mercy to my surviving crews. Captain Sujin Yoon, still commanding the lead dreadnought Retribution, responded with quiet dignity. Your surrender is accepted, Admiral. Medical ships will be dispatched to assist your wounded. Across human space, communication arrays that had been silent for months suddenly came alive with activity. The news spread like wildfire from Terra, stationed to every hidden colony, every refugee ship, every underground bunker where humans had been hiding from the hegemony advance. The war was over. After 3 years of systematic destruction, humanity had won. Not just won, They had achieved total victory in a single devastating battle. But on the bridges of the 50 Dreadnoughts, the celebrations were muted. The crews knew something that the rest of humanity didn't yet understand. Victory had come at a price that was only now becoming clear. Captain Kang felt the familiar burning sensation behind his eyes, the same feeling he had been experiencing for weeks now. The neural interface that connected him to his ship was incredible technology, but it came with consequences that the engineers had tried to warn them about. "Sir," Lieutenant Taemin Park approached carefully. "The medical scanners are showing increased neural degradation across all command crews. The quantum cores are drawing more power than anticipated." Kang nodded slowly. He had known this day would come. They all had. The weapons that could bend reality itself required enormous amounts of energy, and that energy had to come from somewhere. The neural interfaces allowed human consciousness to direct and control forces that no computer could handle, but the human brain wasn't designed to channel that kind of power. "How long do we have?" Kang asked quietly. "Based on current rates of degradation, perhaps 6 months, maybe less." Around them, the other Dreadnought captains were receiving similar reports. Captain Minho Kim on the devastation, Captain Yejin Choi on the annihilation, Captain Sungwoo Park on the obliteration. All 50 ships, all 50 crews, all facing the same inevitable fate. They had known this would happen when they volunteered. The experimental neural interface technology was untested and dangerous. The quantum cores that powered their reality-warping weapons created radiation that slowly destroyed human brain tissue. Every time they fired their main weapons, every time they interfaced with their ship's systems, they were trading pieces of their lives for victory. But they had done it anyway. Because someone had to. Because humanity was facing extinction. Because their children deserved a future free from alien oppression. Through his neural link, Kang could sense the emotions of his fellow captains. Sadness, yes, but also satisfaction. They had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. The hegemony fleet wasn't just defeated, it was obliterated. The alien empire would think twice before threatening any human world again. "Sir, we're receiving transmissions from civilian ships throughout the sector," reported Communications Officer Youngmin Lee. "Colony ships are coming out of hiding. Refugee fleets are heading home. The evacuation protocols are being reversed system-wide." Kang smiled despite the pain growing in his head. That was what made it all worthwhile. Families reuniting, children returning to their homes, worlds being rebuilt. The future they had fought for was becoming real. "Captain," came Sujin's voice over the secured command channel. "We need to discuss what happens next." The 50 Dreadnought commanders held a conference that lasted several hours. They discussed many things, but the most important decision was unanimous. The secrets of their weapons were too dangerous to leave behind. The neural interface technology was too risky for future generations to use. The quantum cores were too unstable to exist near populated areas. When the conference ended, they had made their choice. Over the following weeks, as human civilization began to rebuild itself, the Dreadnoughts gradually withdrew from populated space. They helped with cleanup operations, assisted in rescue missions, and protected the rebuilding efforts. But slowly, quietly, they moved toward the outer edges of the solar system. Captain Kang spent his final weeks writing letters to his wife, if she was still alive, and recording messages for children he would never meet. He documented everything he could about the war, about the decisions they had made, about the price of victory. "We did what we had to do," he recorded in his final message. "We saved humanity, but we couldn't save ourselves. The galaxy needed to learn that humans cannot be conquered, cannot be enslaved, cannot be destroyed. I hope they remember that lesson for a very long time." When the neural degradation finally reached critical levels, all 50 Dreadnoughts jumped into hyperspace one last time. They traveled to the empty void between galaxies, taking their terrible weapons and dangerous secrets with them. There, they would drift forever, monuments to human determination and the price of absolute victory. Back in human space, children who had never known peace began to play in the sunlight again. The galaxy had learned why humanity was never meant to be conquered.